Thinking we're going to be at probably a couple hours tonight.
That's kind of what I
go through. There's a lot of information to go through. We're going to try to get through our piece as quickly as we can, so that we can get on to our guest speaker, which will bring up, you know, the second part of the club. But we want to get everybody oriented to what we're doing this year and, you know, all those things before we kick it off to Miss Campbell.
Thanks.
Who is so very pleased to be here this evening.
6 o'clock.
Oh, okay.
That's my time.
Oh, okay.
Keeping the time. So ladies, I'm gonna go ahead and start because it is 6 o'clock. I'm Adrienne Lance Lucas, president of the NASC Atlanta chapter, and welcome to all of you ladies who are participating this evening in our Wealth Building Wednesdays Investment Club edition for this year. We are super excited to continue all the great work that we started last year with Jennifer Mcreynolds leading us as the chair for this committee. We had an idea last year. We wanted to help empower women financially. And this year, we're going to take it to the next level. So we're making some improvements, which we'll take you through. And we have a phenomenal guest speaker where, again, our philosophy is everything that you learn, you should be able to put into practice. And so we'll talk to you about how that's going to take place and happen this evening. So Jennifer, if I can ask you to share the agenda.
Yes.
And ladies, you'll have to excuse us. The chime will continue to come in as ladies join, but we will just push through. So for this evening, we will talk just a little bit about the club. We'll give you an overview of the expectations for the investment club. And then I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer. She's going to take you through mortgage-backed securities and commercial mortgage-backed securities, so that you can get your first assignment for the club, because we want to make sure that as we're introducing securities and you all formalize your team structure, that you're able to make those investments. We'll talk just a little bit about that. We will have our dynamic speaker this evening, Miss Diana Campbell, who is a senior investment manager or senior partner, I think she is, for commercial real estate. And then we'll have some closing remarks and talk about, meeting again in a couple of months. So we can go on to the presentation, Jennifer.
Awesome. Well, good evening, ladies. I am Jennifer Mcreynolds. Adrienne and I, as Adrienne just said, we co-chair the investment club. So welcome. I'm so excited to get us kicked off this fall. Just quick background on me. I am a class of 2001. Right out of school, I worked for Merrill Lynch on the trading floor, and I absolutely loved it, right? So I got to yell at people, I got to scream at people, I got to throw hand signals at people, and it was amazing. But I absolutely got an amazing foundation to learn about investments. My clients were institutional investors, so not regular people. And I quickly realized that I wasn't making a difference. While it was great to work where I worked, and it was a great foundation for, my financial services background, I also wasn't empowering anybody because my clients, were big institutions. After the collapse, the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, I ended up going to work in social venture capital. So venture capital, making investments in technology, but with a social impact slant. So we were looking for how could we create change and how could we improve the lives of very poor people in the developing world. I absolutely love that work, was there up until the Lord blessed us with our tiny, most recent blessing, my 4-year-old Zuri. And from there, my husband and I had been running a financial advisory practice since I was in college. And so I took that opportunity to reevaluate my life with my new baby and actually come and do the work of really empowering people in my community, but especially working with women, because there are things that we have to think about that men never have to think about in our financial lives, right? And so that's what I've been doing since 2018, working hand in hand. I'm the co-CEO with my husband, but really empowering women to take control of their financial lives in a way that's easy and that's understandable and that's fun. And so with that, let me share our presentation. Let me see here. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. So I figured, Adrian, you and I can tag team on this.
Sure.
But we just want to lay the foundation for what you all will expect to receive in this year. And so, Adrian, if you want to talk a little bit about our mission, that would be great.
Sure. So the first thing is we really just want to make sure that alumni are empowered with this knowledge around financial literacy. And, you know, we will continue to make sure, I mentioned this earlier, that throughout this, we'll have some intellectual discourse through presentation. So each team is going to be asked to put what you learn to practice. We'll have panel discussions, guest speakers, and other things, even field trips, which we will share a little bit about a little bit later. Our club is committed to making sure that you understand several things: securities, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, index funds, ETFs, annuities, REITs, commercial real estate, which you'll learn a little bit about tonight. And we're asking every single person that is in the club to do a couple things. Number one, you're committing to a financial investment in yourself. You will be investing a minimum of $25 per week, $100 a month, into an investment account that will be set up individually for you to help track as the group activity takes place. And we'll ask for you to report out as a group so that we can see how we're faring, okay? The investment should be made 1 week before the preceding month's meeting. So given that we will meet every other month this year, you can make 2 investments if you so choose, because if you want to stay and maintain your $100 a month, please make sure that you do that on a regular schedule. And in order for this club to work, there will be evaluation of each investment that your group, when you are set up into your teams, your group will choose which investment you're going to put forth, and for the rest of the members to actually hear from you, the research that you've done. So although all 5 of the members of your team may put forth a particular security, only 1 is going to be selected for the presentation. And we ask that you have a majority approval for the investment that you all actually present. Jennifer, have I forgotten anything?
Nope, I think we're good.
Okay.
I think we're good. And so we've touched on this a little bit already, but the club goals is really to make sure that we can increase our knowledge, not just about investing in the stock market, but each of those asset classes that Adrian mentioned in the previous slide for both tangible and intangible assets, right? And so we're going to have an educational program every other month, and we're going to evaluate different types of investment, different types of securities so that we can learn. We want to make money, right? So we're going to be tracking our investments because we want to make sure we're seeing a return, and we're going to do that regularly. That's actually very, very, very important. And so you'll see that, you know, we can limit our portfolio, but if you all want to make an investment on a monthly or more, we don't want to hold you back, right? And so we're going to have a brief report about the investments every 2 months. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But what we really want as our goal is to become a model in the HBCU space for what an investment club could be, right? So we are the model. That's what I believe anyways, right? That can be duplicated at other schools. And we want to make sure, man, this is done in a way that can foster friendships, relationships, deeper relationships, but also most importantly, confidence that investing is not hard, it's not challenging, and it's not some foreign language, okay? So let's talk a little bit about the roles of group members. So in our groups, each group, I think we're going to end up somewhere between 50 and 70 members in the investment club this year. It's really exciting. So we'll have anywhere between 5 to 7 teammates, but in that you will have a researcher. The researcher's job is to research, okay? And you may have multiple people that are doing research, just depending on the number of investments you all want to look at, right? You want to evaluate. So it's to do all of the research on the company or the fund or, you know, the REIT, whatever, it's to do the research. So man, if you're a researcher, we need you, right? That's an important. The analyst, well, you're going to be the number cruncher. We've got some, you know, very, very friendly and very basic user-friendly spreadsheets that can be used to evaluate your investment, your proposed investment, right? To make sure that the numbers make sense. The content creators, we need someone that can prepare a presentation. We're going to see a sample presentation in a minute, but man, if your passion is creating a bomb presentation, then we need you for sure, okay? Of course, we need presenters. Not all people are comfortable presenting. We get that, right? Some people, man, they would rather throw up. Some may rather keel over somewhere, but other people are born to shine. We don't want to take that away from you. And in your team, if you guys decide you want to split that role of who presents, we think what's going to happen this year based on the number is that each team will go twice. Some teams may end up going 3 times. So not every group will get a chance to present at every meeting, but you will at a minimum get a chance to present twice, okay? And then lastly, and this is by far a very important role, is the investment tracker role. And that person's role is on that, you know, day of the month that it investments, that you actually input the data of when you invested, the date, the name, the amount that's invested, and the price you paid for that security, that particular investment, that is recorded at the time the investment is made, and that the number, the price for that actual investment is updated on the day before the meeting, okay? Very important role. You and I are gonna be tied at the hip, okay, trackers? We're gonna be tied at the hip. Okay.
Let me just say a little bit about that tracking mechanism. So for those that were involved last year, we had investments and returns that equated to about $7,000 over the course of that 3 to 4 months that you all were making your investments. But that was only based on your stock investment. So because the tracking system was not fully utilized, we didn't capture the mutual funds. We didn't capture the ETFs, all of those things. And so we want to do a better job at that this year. So that tracker position, I just want to reiterate how important that is for us going forward.
Absolutely. And then Adrian, if you want to touch on the trading platforms.
Sure. There are 3 trading platforms that are being recommended to handle the various types of securities that we are interested in sharing with you. E-Trade, SoFi, and Merrill Edge with Bank of America are the 3 platforms that we recommend. If you would please choose one of those platforms, if you don't currently have one of these 3, to sign up before our next meeting, trade investments. Now, for those that have Robinhood, we'll handle some of the questions that may exist right now. If you already have like a Robinhood account, they do not handle certain types of securities that you are going to review and be asked to make a trade. So please, ladies, look at each of these 3 and determine which is easiest for you. And it's up to you. Some chose Merrill Edge last year. I know a lot chose SoFi, which seemed to be an easier platform, and others chose E-Trade.
All right, so let's talk about group assignments. So we will not be assigning groups tonight, but what you will be receiving between tonight and tomorrow is a survey. We want to get an idea of what role best fits you so we can align the teams and make them as equally yoked as possible. Okay, so watch out for the survey to come out between today and tomorrow. And then within 24 hours, please provide your responses, because our goal is to actually have you assigned to a team, have all the teams created by Friday and no later than this Saturday, so you guys can be off to the races. And then your job is to choose your team name. You're going to exchange contact information amongst you all. So we'll provide you with your email, the emails for your group members, and phone numbers where available. Decide what days you all will meet. Some groups met once a month before. Most of the groups that actually performed the best, I feel, actually broke it down into bite-sized pieces, which just meant that they actually met weekly so that they wouldn't leave all the work to the very last minute. So however, we're not going to tell you how to do that, but decide what roles you all are, who your team lead is. Send that back to me in my email. Email me back just so that I know, and we can keep track and have one master list of everyone and group names and all that good stuff, right? So your investments for what we're about to cover now will need to be made by November 10th. The meeting is November 17th. The investments need to be made by November 10th. If you choose to go ahead and do all your work and maybe as a team meet in October and go ahead and execute in October for your $100, do that. If you choose to invest $200 instead by November, do that. We're not going to monitor that, but by November 10th, $200 commitment, one for October, one for November, should have been made. And all of those investments should be tracked, right? All of your investment data needs to be trackers. You need to place that in your trackers at the time the investment is made, and then the price updated the day before the meeting, okay?
One thing, Jennifer, that I just want to mention is that the earlier you make your investments, ladies, the longer the money can work for you. So if you wait until, you know, the second month and then make your $200 investment, you will not see the movement that you would like to see in, you know, a shorter period of time. So time is on your side. So definitely take action quickly.
So what does a sample investment memo look like? Investment presentation? We chose one, you know, I know this team knows who they are, but this is just a sample presentation of what your group's presentation should look like, right? So this was for a mutual fund presentation. What we're going to cover tonight are going to be funds, right? So mortgage-backed securities and commercial mortgage-backed securities, you're going to be executing in funds. So this is going to be a sample presentation for you. I will drop these in your folder. So each team will have a folder with all of the relevant information that you'll need, and you will have a sample. It doesn't necessarily have to look like this, but this is just something for you to go off of for any of you that have never seen, you know, an investment memo or an investment presentation, okay? So these are just some of the things that you want to cover in your presentations, okay? And then this is a sample investment tracker. This year, we're going to have a master tracker that everyone will have access to with multiple tabs for the different investment types, but everyone will have access to one master tracker. Actually, the tracker person of each group will have access to the master, and this is what's going to need to be updated. And so this is just a sample of what that looks like for a couple of the teams that we actually updated, but this is what it's going to look like. You want to record what the investment is. In this case, it's going to be the fund, the number of units. You realize that you can either purchase whole shares or fractional shares. So you want to make sure that when you're choosing a platform to use, that they allow you to buy fractional shares of any type of investment. That's super important because $100 may only buy you partial shares of some things, okay? Make sure you record dates and prices and values and all that good stuff. All right, these are the dates for the upcoming meetings. If you all wanted to just jot those down, but we're going to be meeting on these dates here. I suggest going ahead and putting them, locking them into your calendars, just so that you have them and already have that as a placeholder for these dates. And if there aren't any questions, well, actually, I want to open it up for questions, but here is my information.
Can you put the dates back up, please?
Yes. I'm going to provide you with my contact info and my email so that when your groups are established, you get me again, your group names, the roles of your team members, all the contact information, and who your team lead is, so that we can go ahead and create a master list with all that, okay? Any questions real quick?
Are you able to? Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, this is Kai Williams-Slayton. Some of us were on teams last year and we developed a good rapport. If we'd like to work together again, can we? Or are we just all being split up?
So, hey, Kai, that's a super duper question. I'd heard from 2 teams that had mentioned to me that they absolutely want to stay with their teams. And I think that's absolutely great. If you just will send me a note, just reminding me, because off the top of my head, I can't remember what team you were part of, but just letting me know what group members, are coming back and who isn't. So that way, if there's space and we want to put some new people in your team as well. But no, we absolutely think that's great. If your team was working well, we don't want to break that up, but we will be adding team members to your team.
And part of that is for those that have the luxury of having a year's head start, we need to make sure that we work with our other sisters and bring them up to speed. That's one piece. But 2, I think that you all also were able to figure out what worked well for you individually and what maybe didn't. And so shaking it up a little bit will help. And the third piece is we had a little bit of a competition. So we don't want to keep, the winning teams together all the time. We need to spread that talent around so that others can benefit from their knowledge.
And we definitely want to make sure that there is someone who was here in the spring represented in each of the teams too, so that you can also be a resource to your other team members, some of those new members that have joined. Okay, yes. You can get the presentation. I will drop the presentation. So once all the groups are formed, you're going to have a folder that's going to have a bunch of stuff in it that will allow you to be prepared for this next lesson that I'm about to cover. So if there aren't any more questions, I'm going to go ahead and keep it moving. So let me go and share my screen. All right, so tonight we're going to go ahead and cover what are mortgage-backed securities and commercial mortgage-backed securities, or MBS and CMBS for short. Okay, now we recognize, Adrian and I recognize that we're all coming to the investment club with various backgrounds. Some of us may already be very savvy investors, and others of us, a lot of this is just going to be completely foreign. And we recognize that. So we want this to be something fun, but we also want to at each point make it super relatable so that even if you're not familiar and this just seems like this is a big mountain to climb, that we break it down so that it seems like it's just bite-sized pieces for you and very understandable. Okay, there's some questions in the chat.
I got it. I've got it.
Okay. All right, so let's go. Okay, maybe not. Okay, so what is a mortgage-backed security? I want to make these what's kind of considered a complex product a little bit more approachable and accessible to us. So MBS, and so before I talk about mortgage-backed securities, I want to talk about how mortgages work in a typical model, right? So let's say you want to buy a house and you borrow some money from the bank in the form of a mortgage loan. And then every month, what you're doing is you're paying the bank some of the principal back and you're paying some of the interest to compensate them for giving you that loan. In a traditional model, the bank keeps the mortgage on their books, and they tend to be pretty picky about who they, extend the credit out to, who they give a mortgage to, because they don't want to be at risk of someone actually defaulting on their mortgage. And so this is what we would call the traditional model, right? And so now, okay, my thing isn't working, sorry. So now a bank may have a bunch of people that have mortgages with them, which translates into a whole bunch of homeowners that are paying the bank on a monthly basis. And so they're paying their principal and paying their interest, but the bank would still hold all of those mortgages inside the bank on their books. So what happened was that institutions figured out a different way of doing this. And so now, before we talk about the different ways that institutions figured out, I want to talk about the general concept of securitization, okay? So securitization is when you take something that's not tradable, like a mortgage in this case, and you turn it into something that now is tradable, okay? Something that can be bought and sold through financial participants, through an investment bank like Deutsche Bank, UBS, JP Morgan, Chase, okay? And so what happens when mortgages are securitized is the first thing that happens is the bank no longer holds those mortgages on their books, okay? They take those mortgages, whether it's hundreds of mortgages or thousands of mortgages, and they put them in this like metaphorical box. And instead of those monthly principal payments and the monthly interest payments going to the bank, well, the payments are still going to the bank, but they sort of flow through now into this box, okay? And so this box is what we call a mortgage-backed security, or an MBS for short. And so you can think of an MBS as a box with hundreds of mortgages or thousands of mortgages, where the interest payments and the principal payments are flowing into this box. And then there is this investment bank, is the institution that helps to structure, to put together the securitization. They help assemble these mortgage-backed securities. And so they structure the security and they securitize the mortgages, right? That's what would create this type of product, is an investment bank. So that's not quite the end of the story. What happens then is that the money now is passing through the mortgage-based security, and now it's passing on to investors, right? Because this is why I mentioned securitization, because now that it's in this metaphorical box, the box now becomes this tradable thing, right? Investors can now buy a piece of this box, so that rather than the bank getting your monthly payments now, the monthly payments now are flowing through or passing through onto the investors, and they're now getting those payments. And it's not usually just one investor that buys the whole thing, but it's a bunch of different investors that are buying this pieces of the cash flows of this mortgage-backed security. And so in this model, all of the interest payments that pass through onto the investors, all the investors now get the same percent, right? Or the same rate of return on their investment. And so this, my friends, is what we call a mortgage-backed security. And so it's, again, hundreds of mortgages, thousands of mortgages that you put into this box, that you move out of the bank and into this structure, and then investors buy pieces of this structure. But unbeknownst to the homeowner is still making their regular payments to the bank as usual, but on the back end, those payments now may pass through the bank and on to the investors who bought this mortgage-backed security. So before I wrap up, let's just discuss why this would happen, right? Why do we move to a model where banks were holding these mortgages on their books, to a model where banks are offloading them into these boxes, into these mortgage-backed securities that can be bought and sold? Okay, so the first thing we want to discuss is we want to discuss the risk of default, right? So if a person defaults on their mortgage, they're no longer paying the interest or their monthly payments because they say they can no longer make those payments. And so at this point, the bank is stuck with this mortgage on this house that is sort of no longer paying principal, okay? And so what does the bank typically do when someone isn't paying? Well, then their natural thing to do is to go to foreclosure, right? On a house, and then they try to sell this house to try to be made whole or as close to whole as possible. So that's one thing that can happen, okay? The next thing that can happen is that interest rates can drop, right? And so when interest rates drop, a lot of people, that triggers a lot of people to refinance, right? We've all kind of seen that through COVID. We saw a lot of that start to happen where it became a really perfect time for people to refinance their houses. And so when you refinance, you're essentially getting a new mortgage from a new bank, and the new bank pays off your old mortgage with your old bank, right? The bank essentially then gets a whole bunch of money, oops, and then they lose the mortgage because the mortgage has been paid off, right? And so the problem then becomes that they're getting a bunch of money at a time when interest rates are low. And so the reason that's not that ideal for a bank is that then they're sitting on a bunch of cash when interest rates are low, and there isn't a real clear place for them to go invest that money. Because if you invest in other debt instruments, so because a mortgage-backed security and a commercial mortgage-backed security, they're loans are debt. Typically, when you're investing in a debt product, you're gonna, if that product goes away, you're naturally gonna look, or you typically tend to look for other debt products to invest in. But when interest rates are low, you're gonna get a very low rate of return in other debt products. And so this is what we call the concept of yield, okay? Yield, or how much money you're making by investing your cash somewhere else. And so are you going to get a high yield or a low yield when interest rates are low? Well, when interest rates are low, you're going to get a low yield, right? So that leads us to what people were concerned with next, which is what's called prepayment or prepayment risk. And that is the risk of getting your money back as an investor sooner than you wanted to get it back. So what securitization was meant to solve, it was meant to solve two things. One, it was meant to get rid of the risk of these banks holding the mortgages on their books. They no longer had to worry about the risk of people defaulting on their loans, so they can continue to loan out money for new mortgages and really loan out money to really anyone, right? They were able to go a little bit lower banks, you know, in credit profile, because these investment banks were buying these mortgages off of their books, giving them the money for that, so they can then continue to loan money out for more mortgages, right? So whether or not they were that credit worthy or, you know, had an 800 credit score, securitization allowed banks to kind of de-risk in that way. And then they were then passing that mortgage-backed security on to someone else that could worry about that, right? And so the other reason, the thought of bundling mortgages together into a pool, into a big security where there are hundreds of mortgages, thousands of mortgages in a box, you could also reduce the risk of prepayment. Well, what do you mean by that? That even in a low interest rate environment, if you had a pool with hundreds or thousands of loans in this MBS, the risk that one person or 10 people would refinance their homes was fine, because not all hundreds or not all thousands of people were going to be prepaying their mortgages all at the same time, right? So the risk of that happening was pretty small. So now when you securitize, when you create an MBS or a CMBS, you reduce the risk of prepayment, or that you would potentially get your money back as an investor at a time when interest rates were low, right? And so now, for the purposes of our assignment, you may say, hey, Jen, okay, you just talked all about MBSs, mortgage-backed securities, but you have the CMBS, these commercial mortgage-backed securities. What are those? Well, so this is the difference, right? Mortgage-backed securities are backed by residential loans. Commercial mortgage-backed securities, as the name implies, are backed by commercial mortgages, right? So mortgages on buildings and office space and storage facilities, that type of thing, right? And so those are the major differences between the two, okay? So for the purposes of this exercise, I am going to give you all this presentation for you, okay? You're going to have this to reflect back on when you go do your assignment. Your assignment is going to be to go find funds, fixed income funds, because these are fixed income products. Debt products are the same as fixed income products. To go find a fund for you all to invest in before the next meeting, okay? You are going to be looking for a fund that it can be an MBS fund, a CMBS fund. It could be a REIT fund, right? We learned about REIT. So if you have team members that were here in the spring session, they'll know all about REITs. But you may also find a fund that contains all three, and that is just fine. But that is your job. You're going to go look for a fund, go look at Morningside, go search, MBS, CMBS, REIT funds to invest in, and then you're going to pick from the plethora of funds for you to select to make your evaluations, create your presentations, do your analyzing, do your research before our next meeting. Okay, I hope I broke that down in a way that was understandable about what the product actually is, but you're just buying a bunch of mortgages is what you would be buying, right? And you're really buying the cash flows or the payments that you and I and everyone that's a homeowner is making into our mortgages. You're buying the cash flows or those payments as an owner of these debt funds, okay? So any questions on that?
So Jennifer, what you just explained is clear as mud. However, the filter that I got is this assignment is that we're going to be purchasing mortgages, purchasing debts.
We're purchasing bonds. So this is part one. So we're introducing bonds. Bonds is an asset class that we hadn't covered. So we are introducing bonds. There are all different types of bonds. We are introducing bonds by way of mortgages because the other part two of tonight's presentation is going to talk about commercial real estate. So we wanted to go hand in hand with that, but also introduce bonds to you, okay? So you are purchasing a bond fund that is backed by mortgages. It could be commercial mortgages, residential mortgages, or it could be REITs, but that's what we're looking at this time around. See, Suzette, does that make sense?
Yes, as soon as you said REITs, which is my absolute favorite, it became crystal clear to me. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome. Any other questions before I pass it on to Adrian?
Yeah, I've got a quick question, Jennifer. So I just want to make sure so that when we start doing our research, you said MBS, which is the mortgage-backed security, REITs, and then what were the others?
And commercial mortgage-backed securities, CMBS.
CMBS. Okay. So are they listed that way?
Yeah. So what I will do once your new teams are formed with either your new teams, completely new teams, or your additional team members, I'm going to give you, like I have before, some sample funds that you all can take a look at for you to use to help you find, the universe of those other funds. You will find typically in a mortgage fund, in a mortgage bond fund, there very few just have residential mortgages. They tend to come combined, both residential and commercial mortgages together in that same fund. And more often today, you're going to find that they contain also REITs. So you're going to get to see all three if you want, but you can specifically just buy a REIT fund if you want, because they do have those, or just a real estate fund because they have those as well. Okay, but for those of you that were here in the spring, this comes back to the mutual fund piece that we learned. So you're gonna tap back into that. And so those of you that are new tonight, I am going to make sure that you have all of the background on mutual funds available to you also. Once the groups are created, it'll be in your folders on Google Drive.
And you'll let us know which research tools we can use besides like Morningside.
Yeah, I just dropped one in the chat for you all, Simone. If you look in the chat, I made a mistake on it, autocorrect. It's not finer.org, it's FINRA.org.
Okay.
And if you all go there, it will give you an overview of mortgage-backed securities and commercial mortgage-backed securities. But at the end of the day, when you think about it and how your mortgage works, this is something you would add to your portfolio, right? Where you're not going to see these big returns over time. It's something when Jennifer is responding, saying, we're looking at bonds, these are things that I like to call mailbox money, right? It's a stable coupon, which is what they call it. It's a stable payment that comes on a regular basis. Okay. So when you think about your mortgage isn't fluctuating all the time. Most people have 30-year fixed mortgages. So that payment remains consistent over 20, 15, 20, 30 years, right? So this is just introducing a new security based on where we are in our lives. A lot of the people on the call, right? If you're a little bit older, you might have something that's a little bit less risky, more stable for you. And so one of the securities that you can look at are these mortgage-backed securities. Okay, so I wanted to just add that as an opportunity for you to think about this in a realistic manner and how it fits into your overall portfolio. Does that make sense?
Really good.
Excuse me, this is Irene Curious. And so when you say more stable, does that mean this security will have a reoccurring interest payment like an index fund?
Yes. So the way bonds work, Iretta, that's a great question, is that you are buying, so essentially what a bond is a loan, right? And so it's a loan that can be made to a corporation, right? It could be made to the government. It could be made to your local municipality, right? And so you can buy pieces of this loan into what they call a bond, and it's for a fixed period of time, right? It could be 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 30 years. And so what that bond represents is you have loaned, in a very simple, in a very simple example, if Adrian Corporation decides that she needs to borrow $10,000 and she creates a bond, I say, I have $10,000. I'm going to loan Adrian. Adrian is going to give me an IOU that says that she will repay that $10,000 to me in 10 years because she only needs it for 10 years. But because I've loaned her that money, she's also going to pay me interest for also holding, the cost of holding me giving her that money, right? So at year 10, I'm going to get my $10,000 back. But every month or every quarter, I'm going to get an interest payment for having loaned her that money. So bonds, all bonds, whether they're mortgages or government or local municipality bonds, all work in that same way. It is a promise to repay you by whoever issued that bond, that product, plus the interest payment. And so how that works to stabilize is, look, it is a balancer to a portfolio. And so look, if you're 20 years old, you should have no bonds in your portfolio because you're really young, right? You should be aggressive. Look, one of my clients, she's phenomenal. She's a Spelman sister, and she says, and you guys have heard this, scared money don't make money, right? So you should be all hold, full pedal to the metal, right? In your 20s and 30s, and I actually say in your 40s too, as much as you can stand it. But as you get closer to retirement, you should start pulling back, and you should not be all full, pedal to the metal. You need to start balancing out your portfolio as you get closer to retirement so that it becomes more stable, right? Investing in all stocks is great, but it could be very, very up and down. And as you get closer to retirement, you may not want to gamble with your retirement money in that way. And so bonds introduce a stabilizer to your portfolio where they introduce consistent cash flows where you don't have to play around as much with the volatility in the market. And so some people, you start introducing it slowly as you get closer to retirement. So it might represent in your 40s, 10% of your portfolio. But if you're more conservative, it could be 25% of your portfolio, but it acts as a balancer to your portfolio. And then, if you're in your 70s and you're already retired, you'll start to see way more bonds than anything else in that portfolio.
And do we have also the added benefit? I think I heard or read somewhere, like if you choose a municipal bond, you get a tax break because of it?
Listen, you're getting ahead of yourself.
Oh, sorry.
But yes, we're actually going to cover that in the November session. But municipal bonds represent a whole nother extra little oomph that you can get. So you get all the benefits of a bond, but in a lot of cases, municipalities will also, they could give you a tax break locally for whatever your local or state taxes are. And then you can buy federal municipal bonds that will be federally tax free. And so what that just means is that you end up making a little more money because you're not having to pay taxes on those gains.
So
But
we're gonna table that one
Yes.
because we're getting ahead of ourselves in this first session. I read it. We can tell what team you were on last time.
Hey, gang.
But I want to just say, are there any other questions, just basic questions about what you've heard regarding mortgage-backed securities in the bond security category? Because I want to move on to our speaker.
What drives or what affects the return on the bonds?
So in this case, and the mortgages and mortgage-backed bonds, you're getting a defined interest rate that you're getting, right? What would affect that would be the prepayments, right? So let's just say, in that example that I gave you, one of the reasons that they securitize these things is that there would be less of a chance of a bunch of people prepaying. Well, in 2008, we saw what could happen when a bunch of things got prepaid, okay? And so, there's prepayment risk is still something there. We're just, hey, we go to really ultra low interest rate environment, and this just happens to be whatever bond you bought. Everybody in there decided that they were gonna prepay, where they're gonna refinance their mortgages, right? And so then what would happen is, even though you bought a 10-year bond to get your money back in 10 years plus the coupon, it prepaid. That means it essentially goes away. So now you no longer have that, right? There's, with some bonds, there's a risk that the issuer, they go bankrupt, right? They become insolvent. And so then you don't necessarily, you have to go through the bankruptcy process and see where you are in that line to get prepaid, to get some kind of payment, but you would lose out there in some form. Bonds will usually not be made whole, but you will get something back if that were to happen. If you are a shareholder or you own stock in a company and a company goes bankrupt, as a shareholder, you get nothing. But if you hold debt of that company, you will be in line as one of the creditors to be repaid. So those are some of the things that could affect it. Definitely the credit worthiness of whoever the issuer is, right? So bonds, not to get too much in the weeds, but when you start doing your research, bonds, are rated. So there are rating agencies that rate bonds based on a number of things. Credit worthiness, right? How much money the issuer has in their bank, and so they can go from AAA all the way to D, junk. And so what happens is the better rating they have, the smaller their interest rates tend to be. And the worse the rating is, the higher the interest rate is, right? Because it's harder for them to get money, because if your credit is bad, you end up paying more, right, for borrowing. And so that extends the same with bond issuers. If you have a D rating, that means your credit is bad. They don't really trust you. And so if I'm going to lend you money, I'm going to need a higher interest rate for the fact that you might skip out on paying this. And so so you'll see that bonds are rated based on the chances of you getting repaid. And so that goes from AAA all the way to junk status. Junk status would mean high yield bonds, which is a way to get a higher monthly interest or a higher quarterly interest, but there are some risks with that as well.
One additional thing, Benita, that I would add to that, just so that you all can bring it to your personal experience. I know that there are probably a lot of homeowners, right, on this call. And in your mortgage documents, if the risk of securitizing mortgages, right, is prepayment, if you go back and read your mortgage statement or your mortgage documents, your closing documents, one of the things that you'll probably find in those documents is a prepayment penalty, because they don't want you to prepay. They don't want you to pay off your loan too early, because it disrupts what that guaranteed payment is to the investors. And so what they usually do is they add in an amount that you have to pay as a penalty for paying your loan off early, so that the investors still receive that same return. So just something that you can apply in your everyday life as you go back and look at your mortgage. So with that, we are going to move on to our next speaker. Thank you, Jennifer, for sharing that. And I'm going to, Diana, I'm going to bring up your presentation. Let me see. And you all just let me know when you can see my screen. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Diana Campbell, who's a member of the class in 1991. She's a senior partner with DT Spade, which is an industrial real estate. She's an industrial real estate specialist, but she operates in the commercial real estate space. And we thought it would be great for those of you who actually want to purchase a tangible asset versus a security to hear from Diana, who is an expert in this field. And we're going to kick off with her because over the next 2 months, based on the information that you hear, we have a Spellman sister who is the mayor of Forest Park. And so some of the information that you hear today on how you may make an evaluation of whether or not to buy, sell, or hold a piece of real estate, you can put that into practice, because we're going to go and tour Forest Park's commercial district with our Spellman sister, who is the mayor, so that you can see some of the assets that could be available. So as you all pay attention to this, we will conclude with asking for a number of people that might be interested in taking that tour. So Diana, why don't you take it from here? And I'm happy to drive your presentation with the slides as you go along. Diana, are you on mute?
I gotcha. Here I am.
Okay.
All right. Listen, it is wonderful being here, Adrian. Thank you for having me. And I learned something, Jennifer, from your presentation. And as I'm going through, if you have any points of clarity and want to jump in, there's so much interconnectedness that it would certainly be valuable. And that goes for anybody else in the audience. But let's just go for it. Next slide. All right, so my goal aligned with this club is to compel and empower you to create a strategy for the entire life cycle of your commercial real estate investment. And I will go ahead and broaden that and say to your home investment as well. Even if commercial real estate isn't something you end up doing, I think these are all applicable to how you think of your home as an investment. So I'm going to introduce some basic commercial real estate concepts. I'm going to focus on a discounted cash flow analysis tool, which I will interchangeably call a T-bar, and provide proper context for decisions to buy, sell, and hold. I'm going to give you some examples, and then I'm going to give you a challenge. Now, you already sound like you have some homework assignment, but if you're ambitious and you want to take my slides, this is the challenges that I provide are great preparation for that trip when you go to Forest Park. Next slide. Okay, so tools to leverage and some concepts for to understand. So in terms of the concepts, we're absolutely going to cover these things as we go. So I won't run down that list, but I do want to run down this list of tools just to tell you kind of some of the things that I'm leaving you with that I hope that you'll take an opportunity to dig into. So there's something called a Mueller Commercial Real Estate Market Cycle Report. It comes out of University of Denver. You'll see a reference to this, and it will help look at sort of cycles of commercial real estate. commercial real estate isn't one thing, it's several many things, right? So an apartment building is apartments are asset classes. Industrial real estate, that's an asset class. Hotels, that's an asset class. Nowadays, storage space is its own asset class. Each one of these will have its, office buildings, shopping centers. Those are all asset classes within commercial real estate, and each will have its own life cycle nationally, but then locally as well. So this Mueller report is a national one, but it'll help you keep track of whether things are going up in a particular asset class or whether they're heading down. It's not, if it was a crystal ball, we'd all be rich, right? But it gives you something to sort of think about and to keep your eye on. CoStar, LoopNet, Brevitas, Crexi, these are commercial real estate tools like the MLS, right? Like this is where people go to search for properties. And so you can Google any one of these things, and except for CoStar, you could probably jump on for free. Q Public, if you haven't heard of that, you're on it. Every county keeps track of its real estate, and if it's public information, chances are you can go to Q Public. Fulton County, if you live in Fulton County, Georgia, or wherever you are across the country, look up your county Q Public, and you should be able to find your home there. Or you might see a property down the street and you say, I'm curious about it. You can go to Q Public and see if you can dig out information about it. Other tools to leverage are professionals. If you are at all thinking about commercial real estate investment, you need friends in each one of these categories. You need a broker friend like me, for sure. You need a property manager friend. They have a different set of sort of information at their fingertips. You need a banker friend. They'll tell you all about where to get those mortgage-backed securities, right? And there's some benefits actually to folks who want to have that type of loan, right? It's not very accessible to most folks, but it's very advantageous for business owners who are able to qualify for that kind of loan that you talked about. And then appraisers. So find some friends in these categories and invite them to lunch and pick their brain, but these are huge resources for you. I put a link for a financial calculator because a lot of what we do, I'm just showing you the results, but you want to be able to do it yourself to play around with it. The T-Bar we'll talk about, and CCIM Institute, it's a series of courses that will go into depth about all of what I'm about to talk about. It's very costly, but if this is your thing, you might find it to be a worthwhile investment. Okay, so next slide. All right, so decisions to buy, sell, or hold can be broken down into how do you strategically manage the 4 ways to make money in real estate. There are 4 ways. You're going to buy it at a low price, you're going to have some kind of cash flow, you're going to enjoy some kind of tax shelter, and you're going to sell it hopefully at a much higher price. Those are the 4 ways. And what we're going to talk about is how do you organize those inputs to get the kind of return that you want. And next slide. Okay. Whoops, I think you might
Did
have
I skip a slide?
Yep, that's
Okay,
okay.
I'm sorry.
Yep, just go back 1 or 2.
2?
There we go. That's the one. So basically, this is what we're going to use to look at discounted cash flow analysis. The T represents the little T you see in the corner. But way 1 to make real estate, buy low. That's your investment. That's what you're putting into the investment, and why it's red. It's that's what you're out of pocket for that amount of money, right? And then over a period of your holding time, you're going to aggregate some income. That income might get offset by taxes. So I call that way 2 and way 3. And then hopefully at the back end, you're going to have a great payoff and have some sales proceeds. So that the T-bar captures all of this information over the course of your investment. And then we're going to introduce some tools as to how we make sense of it. So now I'm ready for the next slide. All right, so internal rate of return. So this is something that Jennifer mentioned, or certainly something she knows a lot about. There's a lot of ways to think about IRR. Basically it tracks the annual return on each dollar that is in the investment for the time that it's in the investment. It goes by a lot of names. Sometimes people call it interest rate, discount rate, yield, depending on the context. And it gives investors a way to compare investments. We'll see example of that. But basically, you're capturing how much money is going into the investment and how much time it's being held in there and how many dollars are coming out. One more slide.
It's 7 o'clock.
Okay. All right. So for those of you who really need to get into the mathematics, and I'm not mad at you because I'm a math major myself, or was, this slide is for you. And of course, you'll have this presentation and you can look at why for this particular investment, $10,000 out, no cash flow in the first 3 years, $14,000 in the fourth year, why the internal rate of return is 10%. I'll let you dig into that, but we're going to keep talking about this as a tool for measurement. Next slide. All right. So here I'm simply, I made the numbers a little wonky because I don't want you to try to do any mathematical manipulation, okay? There's a formula behind this and it's a little wonky. The point I'm trying to make is there are a lot of different ways to come to a 10% internal rate of return. And as you can see, and what my challenge is here is think about what a cash flow that looks like this could mean in your context, right? So for example, this first one, they invested $100,000. They got a steady return for 5 years, and then they got back $100,000. Same return as someone who just invested 50 and had it for a shorter period of time, but got back a little more. So IRR is going to help you compare things, and there's a lot of ways to get to a goal. Next slide. So again, I mentioned I'm throwing out these tools and these terms that I'm hoping you'll dig into in your free time, but they're really very powerful and they're used in a lot of different ways. So again, here you have an investment. We can pretend this is, say, I don't know, an apartment building, and you spent $1 million. You got revenue from the apartment building, from your tenants, and 1 through 5 represent those cash flows that you got, and then you sold the property for $1,157,000, and I'm sorry, one right there, you have it there. But this is what so the IRR came out to be 10.55% before taxes, but we have to pay taxes, right? So let's do the same exact investment, except we account for the taxes. Well, the IRR is now 7.35%, okay? So essentially, it is showing a 30.43% effective tax rate. And you might be asking me, well, where'd you get that from? Why is that? Who cares? I'm only trying to demonstrate that 30.43 is less than the 37 you might be paying otherwise. And so it demonstrates what the tax sheltering, what the kind of tax sheltering that happens in a commercial real estate deal, but it also demonstrates an interesting use of the IRR. And I'm only making the point that you should take time to figure out IRR and use it, because it's used all the time in commercial real estate and could be a great tool for you as well. Next slide. So next I want to talk about 2 other terms that come up all the time in commercial real estate, and that is NPV and the discount rate. And so before I talk about that, there's a basic principle, and that is the time value of money, right? And the principle is, if you have more money in your pocket sooner, that's better, right? If you spend $10,000 and you get that right back, that's better than, say, spending $10,000 and waiting for it for several years. That's a basic sort of corollary understanding that we have about money. Now, just to make it really plain, if you spent $5 on, a jug of milk today, Because of inflation, you will likely spend more on that same jug of milk in 5 years from now. And let's suppose inflation were 3%. You would know what to do to get from the cost of milk today to the cost of milk 5 years from now. That the present value of $1 5 years from now is doing the opposite mathematically. So if you look here, if you have, say, $100 in 2024, how do you determine if 8% was that measure of what was going to happen over the next 3 years? How do you discount it back? Let me start over again. If you have $100 in 2024, what is that worth for you today? What is that value? And it depends on what's called a discount rate. And that discount rate represents, my first example was, say, inflation, right? But the discount rate is actually more than that. It is your discount rate. It is the rate that you have decided is appropriate for your level of investing, okay? So for me, if I'm only depending on inflation for my investment, then I might be discounting back at 1.04% over whatever period of time. But if Adrienne's a very savvy investor and she knows that she can make 8% on her money over each year, then she's going to discount at a bigger rate. I want to stop there because it's an important point, and it speaks to what you all are all trying to achieve, and that is an investment portfolio. And your investment portfolio is going to dictate what your appropriate discount rate is for you. So I want to make sure I can pause there and see if there are any questions, if I can explain that better or say any more about it.
Any questions? Okay, I see some things in the chat. Let's see. Not pertaining to that.
Okay.
Any questions regarding this particular piece of the presentation?
I do have a
Simone?
question. This is Simone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Simone, go ahead.
Okay, I'm just interested in knowing what's the minimum, because I hear a lot of large figures being thrown around and not the kind of figures I have in my account. But what's like the minimum that's required for these type of investments?
That's a really good question. It depends on how you acquire it. So if you have cash and you decide you want to pay for a building in cash, you might need $1 million. But if you get a loan, you might need, say, just a down payment. And nowadays, there are commercial lenders that are lending at, say, 15% loan to value. I mean, 85% loan to value. So you might only need 15% of whatever that price is. Commercial, I deal with industrial real estate. Those are your warehouses, fulfillment centers and such. And it's a wide range. There are warehouses that are $500,000 easily, $800,000 easily. And, and the price goes up from there. And that's just warehouses. Commercial real estate comes in all shapes and sizes. I've seen tiny buildings for $100,000, depending on where it's located. So I think in terms of how much cash do you need, it depends on how you're going to choose to purchase it. But there are also lots of ways to purchase property, and you could be with a group of people and have very little out of pocket. You could be with it could be developed and you're raising money for the investment. So I think it's very variable, and it just depends on your wherewithal and what you're trying to achieve.
Adrienne, I wonder real quick if you can maybe just spend like a minute or so or 2 minutes just talking about why we chose to have Diana here to talk about this in particular. Just you and I talked a little bit last year about the collective that got together to purchase a town.
Right.
And so within the Spell House community, people wanted to know, how do we get together and maybe potentially pool money to actually make some tangible investments, right? And so how did we get here, I guess?
Sure. I mean, you touched upon it, Jennifer, and so did Diana, because she mentioned you could have a group, an investors group that comes together to buy property. And I mean, you all have seen a lot in the news, especially for Black women pooling their money together. You have Black women who are now owning hotels where in major brands, which you haven't seen before. You have Black groups purchasing towns to create their own type of resort area. And so there's no reason why we can't do the same thing. And so when we were talking about the investment club, I thought that Diana would be a great person to have come, one, because she's extremely creative in helping you think through different options if you wanted to pool money together as a group. She's also, to your point, Simone, how much wallet do I really need, right? There are a lot of different properties that are out on the market right now, some of which because it's a seller's market. And so people are looking to make that upside. But when you look at some of the buildings that exist, because they've kept them for so long, they're still great deals based on what you intend to do with them today. And so I felt that Diana would be the best person, at least in our sphere of circle right here, that could come and share her expertise with you. And then, as I mentioned, be able to utilize our network as well and look for properties in Forest Park, which is not it's not a primary market. It's adjacent to a primary market. And so you can find some really good deals in that commercial district once you hear what their plans are for redevelopment.
So in that spirit, part of the challenge of purchasing a property is sometimes it's just the purchase. How do I get money for it? But what I see in my day-to-day work, especially as I work with sellers who are selling their property, investors who are deciding if they want to buy the property I'm trying to sell, is that you have to think about not only the commercial property and how to get it, but also when you're going to sell it and what's going to happen in between. And deciding, especially if you're with a group, that process of making decisions along the way has to do with one's individual appetite and capacity for investment. So one of the things you all talked about today were bonds as a very low risk, stocks are very high risk. Commercial real estate or real estate is somewhere in the middle. It comes with some risk. So if you have a portfolio and you're deciding on getting a piece of commercial real estate, you might have to think about, well, is this too risky for me? Or is this, risky enough? What kind of return do I need on this investment in order for it to be worth the while? Because it's going to be a lot of work. So if you're someone who is saying, you know what, I just like going up with inflation, 2-3% a year is just okay for me. Well, if that's your bar, and I don't think that's anyone's bar, but if that's the bar, then commercial real estate might represent too risky, too volatile a process. But if you're someone who says, I've got a ton of money in stocks and it's going up and down like crazy, I would like to have something to kind of balance that out, commercial real estate might actually be great. If you're getting 15% on your investment from stocks and bonds, you might be okay with, say, a 9 or 10% on a commercial real estate. But that's the whole point of thinking about things like internal rates of return and MPV. So I know we're running short on time. I just want to show maybe just a couple more slides on how these concepts are ones that if you ever want to invest in commercial real estate, you just have to get your head wrapped around. Maybe not all at one night tonight, but just generally.
Okay, and I think, Diana, there's a question in the chat. Juliana asked if you could go over the discount rate once more.
Yes, yeah, I think I botched that. So
let me go back to that slide.
Okay. Oh, nope, you're gonna go forward from there.
Go forward.
Mm-hmm. Nope, you went too far, but there you go, right there.
Okay.
All right. So if somebody said, here's $5 and it's going to escalate by 8% for the next 3 years, you would take $5 and you would multiply by 1.08. That's $5 plus 8% of $5, right? Say yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So if you had to do it for 2 years, it would be 1.08 squared, right? You would do that and then you do it again. That's how you get $5 and escalate it by 8% 1 year, escalate it by 8% the next year. Discounting is simply doing that, dividing. It's simply doing the same process, but dividing it back. So that's what this present value at 8%, take that $100 in the future and divide it by 1.08 cubed. Now, where I got the 8% comes from the discount rate that you determine is appropriate for you personally. So just say that I want you to be convinced that, hey, I have a discount rate. I don't know what it is, but I do have one. And that's something that I'm challenging you to figure out and that I think is appropriate for being in this club, figuring out what your personal discount rate is. But once you have it, all you're doing is dividing that future amount by 1.10 your rate, the amount of years. Is that better?
Is that a universal number?
Nope, it's a personal number that you have for you based on your risk tolerance, based on how savvy of an investor you are. So if you're
I'm sorry, Diane, I was referring to the 1.08 cubed. Is that universal, that part of the formula, or?
The cube part comes from the fact that I was talking about 2024, so 3 years away.
3 years. Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I'll chop through pretty quickly.
So Julien, so the formula, if you all wanted to calculate the formula still stands. It's what value are you looking at? What your interest rate is, that's the 1.08. So you can determine that. As we're talking about the investment club, we mentioned that the stock return for the group was like 11%. So you could say, okay, 11% is my personal, right? And by at whatever year it is to the future, that's the exponent that you're going to use. Okay.
Yep.
So that's your formula.
Okay. All right. Let's go to the next slide. I'll chop through the next few pretty quickly. And again, don't get bogged down on the details here. I just want you to know how you use it and how it's so powerful, right? So here's an investment over 3 years. They invested $500,000. They got back $75,000 each year. They determined their discount rate was 7%, and they got what's called an MPV of $186,602. What this is saying is that in order to achieve those kinds of returns, they can actually still invest more into this. They can even invest more money into this investment and still get a 7% return. And in fact, even at 15%, you see the next example, they can still invest more money into this project and still get a 15% return. So I want to just go ahead and click one more and just give you examples of how people use these kinds of things to make decisions. So do I invest at all? So now I'm bringing the internal rate of return along with the net present value and the discount rate. So here goes that example we just saw. That's your personal discount rate. It produces this 186,602 and this internal rate of return. So the internal rate of return tells you when your discount rate is the same as the internal rate of return, you have a net present value of 0. If you, right, and that middle number is telling you how much more you can put back into your investment. So you can see if you put too much, if you put the 186, you're good to go. But if you, over this third example where it has 46,400, that's negative. That means you have to back off a little bit from your investment. right, in order to get to the returns that you need. So basically, this first chart is telling you that an investor would like this. They say, okay, 20.47 IRR, I'm good to go. I get the returns that I need at 7%. The second one, okay, this is still good, right? But that third one, I've gotten too aggressive with my discount rate. This is not a good investment for me. I need more from an investment, that 25%, than this investment is able to give me. So the IRR is used to help investors decide, do I even invest in a project at all? Is it worth my while based on my discount rate? And I'll go to the next one. So same thing here. You might use this for negotiation. Somebody's trying to buy a property and you know how much you can flex. You're tug of warring over the price. You know that you really can't go over a certain amount because then you will not achieve the rate of return that you are shooting for. So again, just another use of it. And then one more example of a use and then some more practical things that I'll go through really quickly. So yeah. So here, here's an analysis where somebody's invested a chunk of money to own a property. These are all their mortgage statements, and then they cash out at 7 million. It looks great, but really, if they wanted a 10% yield, they're coming up very short. All right. On the other side, the lease, they have just paying cash out. And so somebody might say, do I own it or should I lease it? Well, in this case, they should probably own it, not because they're making a ton of money, but because they're not losing as much money as they would if they were leasing. So again, it's okay if you don't understand all the mathematics here. That's something to be digested. I want to give you a sense of how these concepts are used quite powerfully. And then one more slide. And here's a whole host of ways in which MPV, IRR, and the discount rate are used together to help people make really important decisions about commercial real estate. They can compare investments, decide if they're going to, say, sell a building and then lease and hold it for a while, lease it back from the new owner, lease versus buy. Do you pay in cash or finance? All of these kinds of decisions that you can think of all can be broken down into that T-bar chart and then used with the discount flow analysis. And next slide. So I want to go back to those 4 ways that we should be thinking about our commercial real estate investment if we make one. Buy low. How do you do that? Well, I would advise you to choose the asset class that is meaningful to you. I love industrial real estate. I love those big dirty warehouses. That's cool for me. But you might be someone who really likes a shopping center because you like to shop. Investments are best when you are connected with them and that you have some feel and intuition and it brings you some kind of joy. So you have to choose your asset class. It's not just commercial real estate, it's what type of commercial real estate. And then find ways to study the market. You're going to go on a tour. That's an excellent way. Walk it, go join investment clubs that are local to that particular market. LoopNet is an excellent way to just research properties. And I talked about leveraging professionals. And then next slide. I also talked about this cycle. So one of the ways in which you learn a market is to get different opinions about whether prices are getting ready to top out and then start to decline. And so this is one resource for you as well. Next slide. Just because of time, I'm not going to dig into this, but I have left this slide for you so that you can really just kind of have something to kind of chew on as you're looking at different properties and as you're looking at prices and as you're looking at the way in which commercial real estate professionals are describing properties. So 2 really important ways to value a property is comps. You all probably have heard of that from your own homes. And you want to look at properties that are similar, right? And then determine which property is most similar to yours. So similar in terms of the way it's used. So that's really important in commercial real estate. You really don't want to compare a warehouse to a shopping center. They are different uses. Similar in ownership. Investors tend to pay less for a property because they're trying to buy low. Owners tend to buy more. So when you're trying to compare prices and you find that all the buildings that you want are purchased by owners, it's going to seem inflated compared to the ones that are purchased by investors. Similar market, geography matters. Of course, the age and condition matter, when it's sold, and the size, right? If I have a large REIT, a large warehouse like Prologis is a big REIT. They have hundreds of thousands of square feet. That pricing is going to be different than something that's 2,000 or 3,000 square feet. Another important method is the income method, and that is you're looking at all of your income, you're taking out your operating expenses and vacancy, you come up with what's called a net operating income. You have to do a little research, but you'll notice that properties go along with cap rates, which you'll find when you go to research properties. And there's a simple formula that the net operating income over value gives you a cap rate. The value is equal to the net operating income over the cap rate. So depending on what piece of information you can find, you can figure your way into how the property might be valued. Is any questions as of now?
We do have a question,
Yep.
Diana. And so someone asked, what are your thoughts on owning commercial property when so many people are working from home as opposed to coming in? Also, so much is done with Zoom, and it seems like it's tougher for commercial buildings to survive. Can you still make great returns? And in your opinion, what are the best commercial spaces to own at the moment?
Okay, so I'm gonna go back to, it depends on the type. So I'm in industrial real estate. Atlanta is a logistics hub for the entire Southeast, if not, the country. It is a great time to own industrial real estate in Atlanta. However, if you are in an apartment, like a shopping center, it's a dicey time because, right, people aren't shopping as much. People are shopping differently. They're going online. If you're an office building, people don't know how they're coming back to work. So what's happening, what I'm finding is that the office landlords, they're not really budging on price much, quite frankly, but they are conceding to things like, okay, well, I'll build the space out for you. I'll paint the walls and put in the carpet and put in the light fixtures for you. Or they're making different types of concessions. I'll give you 4 months free rent in the beginning. So they're keeping their same rent, but they're giving these other concessions. That's what's going on in office buildings. I think location always matters. The type of property and where it's located is always going to matter. I think restaurants are kind of tough right now as well because they have so much heavy duty equipment. They really need to keep their tenants, and I know that industry is really struggling. So it really just depends. But industrial is going very strong. And did I answer all of that?
Yeah, I think you did. And this was a question from earlier. Mm-hmm. What would be a common discount rate for a savvy investor?
I think in the 10, 11, 12 range. I think that's pretty aggressive, but I want to actually throw that back maybe to you, Jennifer, or actually I have a slide a few down where we're going to get to that. So let me just go through the last few and then we're actually going to get to that because I made some guesses as to what kind of rates folks were getting. Okay, so way 2 and 3, cash flow tax shelter. I don't know if just go ahead and ask if you're not clear on how taxes impact commercial real estate, but I'll tell you that depreciation is a powerful tool. You're able to depreciate a portion of the property over 39 years, and you save taxes on that. It gets recaptured later, but it gets recaptured at a lower rate. So That's a powerful tool. You don't pay taxes on your mortgage interest. So, those two things make a big difference in your investment. And so being able to understand your investment after taxes is really important. And of course, taxation will differ with who you are, right? Like if you are a young person and you don't have a huge income, your taxation might not be as steep as someone who is older. And so taxes like that discount rate are pretty personal as well. And the next slide. I think I pretty much said that one. We can keep going. And then, yeah, of course, selling high, I would say the same kind of comments as buying low. But selling high, what's high enough? Well, it goes back to those discount rates. And the next slide. And here, yeah, this is the one where I said, well, let's talk about what your potential discount rate is. And if these numbers are off, Jennifer, do correct me, but for stocks, do you think that is the kind of return you might expect for someone who is savvy and maybe really doing well? I'm guessing.
Definitely think averaged over a number of years, yes. I think there's some anomalies that have happened, in the last couple of years that I don't think will continue to be repeated.
Right.
But yeah, I think 15% for a savvy investor, that's a good target.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And bonds, is this too low or is that about right?
Bonds is such a tricky animal, right? In this interest rate environment that we're in. And so I think 3% is a good target. Yeah.
Okay, and then inflation. So, and for residential real estate, I've always heard about 4%, but I don't know. Is that quite? Where's inflation? I would say it's in somewhere between 2 and 4.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good.
And maybe CDs. If you just went to the bank and got yourself a CD for a few years, you might be able to do something like this.
I think that's too high for CDs.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that adjustment, I sort of kind of nailed the other ones, but with the adjustment for the CDs, what you have to determine is, okay, so if I'm going to get this commercial real estate property and I know what MPV and discount rates and IRR are, and this investment is only going to give me an IRR of 3%. Right? You have to ask yourself the question, is it worth doing at 3% when I can earn 3% by a very safe bond that I don't have to go out and clean the toilets around? Does that make sense?
Yes.
And it's
Absolutely.
a basic example, but it is how investors think. If I'm going to get a certain return and take on all the risk that goes along with managing and owning a property, it's got to be worth it. So it's going to have to beat out some other stuff. There's going to have to be a reason. So that's what I mean. You got to know your discount rate. You have to know why you're investing and what you expect to get out of it, and how does that compare to other ways I might be able to get to that money.
That's good.
Okay, am I saying something?
Yes, that's good.
All right, so let's go to the next slide. And again, this is just kind of, if anybody wanted to me to revisit something, I just wanted to remind us what we tried to get to. And then the next slide, I have some challenges. And I know that you have your formal homework assignment from Adrienne that she assigned early, but the next two slides, you can just read at your will. And basically, for the one thing you can do is for your own house, right? Like, how much did you put on that down payment? When do you think you're going to sell it? And how much will you get back? That's your sales proceeds, and the initial investment. And then what is that cash flow in between? What do these numbers say about the investment of your home? What does that make you think you're going to do in terms of remodeling that bathroom or putting on that deck, right? You're decreasing that cash flow. You're putting more money into the investment. Should you? It depends on how much you want your home to be an investment and what kind of return you want your home to give you. If you're renting a house, you might do this as an exercise to plan on when you buy your house, and if you buy it, how long you keep it. And then the next slide is, I think, the last one. This is a very real life scenario that I'm going through right now. I have a client. She has 10,000 square feet of a warehouse in Forest Park. It's at a Prologis facility, which I'm sure you'll see when you go down there. She pays about $9 a square foot in rent, and she's doing really well because she's in the transportation logistics industry, which is rocking in Atlanta, and she needs 10,000 more square feet. Should she buy a 20,000 square foot building, or should she continue to perhaps just lease another space? It's unclear. So I put down some parameters and things that you can do to help me help her. If her rent is, I've given her how her rent's going to escalate over the next 5 years. You have the tool LoopNet to find her a new facility. Maybe there's nothing out there. It's a really hot time for warehouses. I know she can get an 85% loan to value if she tries to buy that property, and you guys can crank out a mortgage calculator to figure out what those payments would be. What discount rate should she choose, right? So for a business owner, they have to think about, if I spend all my money on buying a property, I can't hire somebody. I can't invest in the machinery that I need. I can't afford capital for my business. My business can grow if I invest in it. My business can't grow if I put that money in a piece of property. So that's where sort of some of this decision comes in. I'll leave you all. I know the hour is late. I'll leave you all to read the rest of this, and you have the slides if you want to take these things on as a challenge. No matter what if there was a portion of this that resonated with you, there's something that you can do to kind of practice these concepts, and I would encourage you to do that.
Diana, that was great.
Thank you,
so
Diana.
much. Are there other questions that have come through the chat? Let's see.
We have a hand raised, and I feel like I hear somebody snoring also. But we're sorry we put you to
That's
sleep.
exactly what I think I hear.
We'll mute that person.
That's okay.
Well, I don't see the hand raised. Jennifer, can you help me there?
Who was it Terry? Terry, I thought Terry or Tiffany. I just saw it, but
I saw Tiffany with a hand clap.
Oh, was it a hand clap? Okay, my bad. My bad. That was fascinating. Iretta, if you show me where you have those CDs and money market rates, girl, I need to know, because I think right now what I'm seeing, money markets are paying anywhere between 0 up to 25 basis points, or about 1/4%. Maybe 0.5% if you've got a higher balance money market. And then CDs up to 5 years are kind of in that same range, 0.5%, maybe 1%, for locking it in for a 5-year period. But it's just a really tough, low interest rate environment. But if you have something else, some other knowledge, please share it.
My son is getting 3% from Elements, the online bank.
Okay.
And I guess Cece got, what was it, 3 months ago? Maybe more than that. I'm sorry, because that was before I was in the hospital for COVID. Delta Credit Union, when I was sitting in their webinars for members, I think that was when they still had the CD, I think 5-year at 2%. Now, it might have changed since then, but these are the last numbers. But my son is still getting 3% in his Elements account. Yeah.
Just like everything else, it's based on, how much you put in. So sometimes you will get higher yields for CDs if you put in $10,000 or 25. You can move.
Yeah, it was probably maybe 5K, because at that time I was willing to lock that much in. So it's probably the 5K rate. But the Elements 3% on interest. There's no, well, let me talk. My youngest is an investor. He does, stuff. But still, I don't think he had maybe a minimum of 1,500 or something that he's got to keep in it. It's tied to his checking account.
Yeah. So that will vary.
Yeah.
So again, we want to thank Diana, and she has put her information into the chat. So if any of you are interested in speaking to her, if you're looking for a property or interested in forming another group, right, to begin looking at commercial real estate as an investment, please make sure that you reach out to her. She is extremely knowledgeable. She has a wealth of resources and others within her office that she can tap if you're not necessarily interested in warehouse space. You can look for other options that exist out there in the marketplace. So Diana, thank you so much. We appreciate you. And I want to, before we leave, I just want to pull up a poll for to see if you all would be interested in taking a tour in Forest Park. Can you all just vote on these dates and times that you may be interested in traveling to Forest Park for a tour of their commercial district? It will take about an hour or two, and we will be served lunch.
I want to go.
Vote.
I did.
Okay.
And if you all want to, if there's time and inclination and you want to visit my client's warehouse, I bet
That'd be great.
I bet she would love to have you.
That would be great, Diana.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have a few more people who haven't voted. If you haven't voted, I'm going to guess that you are abstaining based on these dates, or you could be checking your calendar still. So I'll just wait a few more seconds before we close this out to see where we come out. It's pretty even right now.
Adrian, would you give the YouTube, was a person asking about the live stream? Give the
What is
YouTube,
the question? I'm sorry.
they're wanting to know how somebody can see the live stream if they're not local.
Yes, you can go to our YouTube page. Just search for NASC Atlanta on YouTube and you'll be able to see this presentation. Okay, well, I'm going to close this out. And it looks like October 14th at noon, just by one person. So we will get back to the mayor and see whether or not that date and time is still available for her. And we will send out a message for everyone that is interested in participating. Last question for you all, and you can just drop it in the chat. Given where we are with the Delta variant and COVID, we have two options. One is we can drive ourselves to each of the locations, or she's willing to get, and rent a bus. It will include the Spelmanites that are interested in coming, as well as our Morehouse brothers. We will wear masks, but there's not a whole lot of social distancing on a bus. But so let me know if you would be interested in traveling individually or on the bus in the chat, and we will make that decision accordingly. I see a couple of buses, and if you have no preference, that's fine too. Okay, a lot covered tonight in our kickoff, so that was fantastic. Jennifer, I'm going to give you the closing remarks so that we can get on our way for this evening.
Well, ladies, this has been awesome. I hope you feel that it's been informative. I hope that at all points you feel like you can come to us and ask questions, even if it seems like it might be above your head. But it's about getting better and learning and going from where we are. So remember, expect a survey to come out either tonight or by tomorrow, where we'll need your responses so that we can get you grouped up into your teams no later than Friday or Saturday this week. And then I will be expecting back from you the information on your teams, your roles, who your team lead is, and what your team name is, so we can go and get started on this horse, man. I'm so super excited. I'm excited for all of you that plugged in and hung on to the very end. And I can't wait for us to just have a ton of fun and get some money together. Okay, guys? Diana, thank you so much for being here tonight, and thank you all. We really appreciate it.
And ladies, if you have not paid your dues, please make sure that you do. This particular club is for dues paying members only, whether you're a part of the Atlanta chapter or another chapter. You just have to show your proof. So if you are not, they'll be checking that for our next session to make sure that we are compliant. Okay, everyone have a great evening, and we will see you next time. Take care.
Peace and blessings, sisters. Go get that